Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, your moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap today, as always, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to listen to the webinar later on demand. After today's event, we'll be sending out an email that contains a link to access that webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time today during the presentation you have a question for either of our panelists, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. And we'll take a few minutes after the presentation and go through the audience questions. And we do have a few polling questions also during today's presentation. So please, hopefully, we'll get everybody involved in answering those polling questions. And then finally, we are going to be giving away 5 $50 Amazon gift cards at the end of today's presentation. So please listen in and best of luck. Hopefully, you'll be one of our winners. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Value Stream Management. Is your organization ready? Our speakers today are Mark Hornbeek, who is Principal Consultant for DevOps at Trace3, and Jeff Keyes, who is Director of Product Marketing at Plutora. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you both for joining me today.
Hi, everybody.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey.
I think you're kicking things off, or is it Mark?
I am kicking things off. If we'll go
Awesome.
to the next slide. You know, this webinar is part of a series that Plutora and Trace3 have embarked, and it's the second in that series. We hit the next slide. If you haven't seen the webinar prior to this one, you know ought to go back and look at what Mark and I presented previously about why do you need value stream management and how is it effective for DevOps. Mark, you able to hit the next slide?
I'm showing value stream management series. Is that the one?
Yeah, slide 2 isn't showing on my end.
I'm sorry. Mark, why don't you, did you unpause your slides? Maybe that's what the issue is.
I thought I did.
There we go.
Okay.
Excellent. So, like I said, this is part 2 of a 5-part series. You ought to check out the other webinars that are there. Just a reminder, why is Plutora here? Hey, we're in the space of value stream management. We're a platform to help you manage application delivery. And as such, we want to help you understand this process. Remember that any kind of change is not just run out and buy a tool. And as much as I'd love to have you give us a call and sign up, that's not really why we're here. The point is to improve application delivery, and it takes a lot more than that. It really is people, process, and tools, and you've got to get all 3 in a line. And the point of today's discussion actually gets into some of those pieces. If we hit the next slide. So our goals today, really, we're going to walk through this agenda, and I'm not going to read it to you, but the whole entirety of the goal is to look at how you can implement and manage your application delivery as a system, talking about the entirety of the value stream itself. And we really want to get into the key components so you can get primarily alignment with your team. And then by getting alignment, you can now get everybody on the same page of what are the critical problems to solve. And then how do you measure success? Because, you know, at the end of the day, if you can't answer that most fundamental question, you're going to struggle. What is the most fundamental question? Are we improving? Are we doing better than we did before? Because that's the point. And in order to make that happen, you've got to address the entirety, the people, the culture, the systems, and the tooling that you're doing to get that. So today's webinar is going to walk through that process. How do you get it done? How do you make this happen in your organization? So not only this, but you're going to learn a few more things. So we're going to dive into. You want to hit the next slide. So we're going to talk a bit about how do you actually, in getting alignment, a lot of that focuses on assessments. And why do you need to do assessments? How are these assessments conducted and what does that look like? And then once you get through that, how do you take that output and do something cool with it so you can continue forward? So with that, I'm really excited to have Mark Hornbeek. He's the DevOps lead at Trace3. So if you were to hire Trace3 to walk through value stream management, you're going to gain some of the insights that he would basically take you through from a consulting organization. And that's what makes this cool. So with the next slide, Mark, we're gonna kind of go through this a bit and go through this. So I'm kind of excited about it. So why value stream management and why are assessments interesting and important? Tell us about that.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me on the webinar again. I appreciate it. And DevOps.com for facilitating us. I really appreciate having an opportunity to participate. Certainly, assessments is something that I do quite a lot with clients with Trace3, and value stream management is something that I find extremely interesting. In my mind, it's kind of the top of the food chain of DevOps, meaning that it really encompasses the entire end-to-end value stream from not only CI/CD, but broader than that, from planning through to operations. So getting assessments of that broad scope is really important because it encompasses so many things. To try to understand whether an organization can benefit from value stream management requires quite a wide scope. There are a lot of folks involved. It's not just a matter of one expert in the customer trying to decide whether you need value stream management. You need an entire team because there's so many different components involved, from the beginning through to the end of the end-to-end value stream. So picking the team, getting them agreeing on what their overall business goals are for DevOps and the end-to-end value stream, getting alignment about how they're going to do that, and understanding where they are now. All of these things take kind of a team, and
right,
determining whether there's whether VSM, value stream management, is important enough to accomplish those goals, because there are maybe some situations where you really don't need to invest in value stream management, but if you've got a sophisticated environment with any a lot of steps in the value stream and a lot of components, then value stream management can add a lot of value. And
right. Mark, you and I met because we both had lopped on to value stream and conducting this. I know you mentioned you had a case where there was something about they weren't really sure about doing CI/CD until you did some work along these lines. Tell that story. That was a cool story.
I've been involved in this quite a while. I have a lot of stories, so I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but
this is the insurance company, I think it was.
Yeah, I was going to say one that you just triggered my memory. Yeah, there was a large automobile insurance company that had pretty much decided they were already mature in their CI/CD capability and their DevOps capability. They asked me to come in just to kind of review it, and it didn't take very long to find out that they really were not very mature. They hadn't really taken into account their full end-to-end value stream at all. They were more of a continuous integration setup with some good tools for continuous integration, but their processes did not properly encompass from planning through to operations, and in fact not even some of the continuous delivery aspects of CI/CD. So that was a kind of an eye-opener for that organization, and as a result, we ended up doing an assessment for them and helped them build a roadmap to take them into the future.
Cool.
So why don't I get into this a little bit further? How are the value stream management assessments conducted? I have listed here 13 steps. I'm not going to go through them all, but the word alignment keeps coming to mind in these steps. I mean, the idea is that you don't just go off in a room or do some surveys and come back with an answer. What's very, very important is to get the entire assessment team, first of all, select the team carefully, and then make sure that everybody is on board at each stage in the process. So these process steps are intended to really keep everybody in sync. There's not some, wizard or consultant that goes off in the corner and comes back with an answer and expects everybody to accept it. Instead, the idea is to step by step build an assessment, make sure you've got clarity on the pain points, and make sure you've got clarity on the current state, make sure you've got clarity on possible future state, and get agreement on the roadmap before you're finished with the assessment. So by the end, it's pretty clear that the result is owned by the client, because it's really their data, and the assessor is just facilitating the whole operation and the whole process.
Yeah, I remember when you first showed this to me, it felt a little overwhelming, but as I've gone through it, I totally get why you need each step of this. And I know we're going to get into each step of this, so that's the whole point of this webinar. So it's actually pretty cool. So before we do, though, I think we have a survey actually to kind of get folks' impressions about where they think about value stream management. I think we can push that survey live now. So the question here is, what extent is your organization thinking or using value stream managing your value stream today? And what's your level of knowledge? What's your expectations on it? So looks like one of the questions got cut off there. VSM is being implemented, but not yet part of our production environment, I think is one of that. Including, hey, we're not going to use it. We don't know. We're just now getting familiar. Fill that out and click an answer there. So, Mark, what do you think about this? What do you think the results are going to be?
I think a lot of people are still getting familiar with VSM. That's my own opinion from just my own interactions with clients, and the relationship of VSM with DevOps, partly because there's still many enterprises that are really trying to figure out how to do DevOps. And as I say, I think VSM is kind of at the top of the food chain. There are ways that VSM can be leveraged without, implementing a full CI/CD pipeline. Some people still are struggling with manual processes, and maybe they don't realize that VSM can help automate the interactions between people and meetings and orchestrating test environments and things like that. So I think there's opportunities there, but in reality, I think a lot of people are still getting familiar with it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The part is, obviously, if you had decided to not use VSM, you're probably not attending this webinar. So maybe the results are a little bit skewed, but understood. So we can go ahead and close this poll. In fact, well, voila! So surprising. No one decided to not use VSM. And the majority of the people are just now getting familiar. That's why you're here. This is the process portion of managing by managing the system. And what I'm really excited about next is we're going to dive step by step. How do you do it? How do you actually make this thing happen? So with that, okay, this is it. Why is it important? The very first step is to have leadership be involved. And I know you put that and so, okay, Mark, why is this important? Why do I have to get leadership involved? Why can't I just rally a few people myself? And frankly, how do I get my leadership involved?
So a lot of people ask me, where do you start with DevOps? You start, as an individual group and organically grow your DevOps implementation, or do you start, middle layer, middle management, or maybe in ops, or maybe in dev? All of those things are okay and ultimately can work, but I find the most optimal way to get to an enterprise-wide DevOps is to start with leadership, because leadership has the authority and influence and visibility over the whole organization and can help orchestrate a solution most optimally. And that's true with VSM or anything else pretty much. But usually that's the right place to start. There are other places to start, but getting leadership team on board, it's usually a team. There's usually an executive sponsor that sort of gets it, and then conduct the whole process, getting buy-in for the process steps I mentioned in the prior slide.
Sure.
Selecting goals and selecting a model application, and that's another key piece. Is don't try to boil the ocean, but pick an application to start with that you can use as a model.
So kind of when you do this, you got to get leadership understanding why we're doing this and help them understand the process. So a little bit of a selling up kind of thing.
Yes.
So once you do that, part of the thing you're pitching is to do, really assessment. So what's your business reasons behind doing assessments?
I refer to the State of the DevOps report. There's a really useful report.
Hmm.
It essentially talks about 6 categories of goals or pain points. They all ultimately help improve competitiveness, but what's startling about DevOps and value stream management being a part of an application to support that. Agility usually comes out on top as a
Hmm.
business reason to be able to produce, release innovations quicker and more frequently. But close behind it is stability, because you sure don't want to have something fast and unstable.
Right,
And
right.
then at the same time, if with VSM and DevOps, you can in fact do that efficiently as well. And don't do it though without taking care of security. As it turns out, continuous security, DevSecOps, rugged DevOps, you can actually improve security as if you integrate security with the value stream. And quality cannot be left behind. In fact, again, it can be improved. And finally, employee satisfaction also tends to improve. So those are goals that, if done right, VSM can help with. Altogether, they help improve competitiveness.
Absolutely. I would have thought everybody would have the exact same answer until I started talking to Platora customers and realizing that no, Eli Lilly is one of our customers, and they have such massive regulatory compliance that I get why, getting things out there super fast isn't their biggest priority. It's quality and compliance, and yet others that are in the wireless space are all about how fast can we get stuff out there. And then it's interesting as we've done these assessments and help people through this process that once you get alignment with leadership on the business goals, you all now have a common driver that you're going for, and it sort of sets you up for the next step. So I totally agree, Mark. Next slide. There we go. So, okay. So now you get alignment. You get this aspect of I know what our pain points are that we really want to target, because whether it's we got to increase agility, velocity, improve our quality. Now, basically, the next step is we've got to pick an application. We got to pick a pipeline to pick on, basically, and use, lack of a better word, we're going to run a dojo with this. We're gonna really figure out the right value stream, the right methodology with the value stream. And so, how do you go about picking an application out of the masses?
Okay, so this is really important, and I've seen this go wrong too many times. So we actually have a tool that we use, a little assessment tool just to do this, to help clients pick the right application to start with. There's always a tendency to try to jump into too many applications at once, and for the most part, I find that really doesn't work all that well.
Sure.
You're better off to find kind of an ideal application to really have the organization, look at. So some of the key characteristics of that tool, first of all, is it an application that changes frequently? If it doesn't, why would you, implement a value stream management?
Why would you mess with it? Right.
It's going to be an overhead rather than something that's going to drive benefit. Something that will benefit from shorter lead times, because the whole idea with value stream management is to help you identify bottlenecks and to shorten lead times. Make sure that the team members are open to change. If the team is stuck in their ways and they're not going to change, why beat your head against the wall? Find a different application. Costs, if you want to reduce costs, so presumably you're going to pick an application that has significant costs already. You might not want to choose an application that has extreme risk, but on the other hand, don't pick one that has no risk, or it won't be very interesting.
Right.
And finally, find something that has a tool chain that already is in place and doesn't need a wholesale change, or it might be just too expensive to start with. So those are some of the key characteristics of picking a model application.
Gotcha, gotcha. Have you had any cases where you've done an assessment and then you're like, we screwed up, we picked the wrong application?
I hesitate to say, yeah, more than one.
Understood. So it's not
Or,
easy, right?
well,
Even the pros get it wrong sometimes.
well, it's interesting, even going through the selection tool sometimes they get it wrong because there's a lot of biases, and people don't want to look at the reality of it. But yeah, I certainly have. I had a government agency that picked a COTS application, and in the end, the CTO came in and said, "Hey, guess what? Why did we pick this one? We should have picked an enterprise application instead, because we would have got more value out of the assessment process." So that kind of took the wind out of the sails of all the results. But you know, this is a great example of why you really want to be careful to pick the right one, so that you end up with a roadmap that you can actually action and that everybody agrees that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, and I know later we're going to talk about the tool of how to pick the model application. So I won't labor that point now, but I'll just tease it and say, okay, moving on. So, you know, what's interesting then is, okay, so you pick a model application. Now you've got to figure out and coordinate, you know, running the assessment and coordinate the activities. Uh, How do you do this? What's the process? Because okay, take us through that.
Right. So it's seems simple. You know, you make a schedule, and of course, everybody will just follow the schedule, right? Well, not really.
Sure. It happens
Especially,
because Mark said it would. Got
I
it.
mean, it's so important that, like I say, I'm going to keep using this word alignment and getting buy-in, because they need to buy into the schedule as well. That there's nothing more frustrating than saying, yeah, we're going to do this, and only a quarter of the core team shows up, or they're being pulled aside for other urgent activities. So the key is to, first of all, identify, you know, who's responsible, you know, kind of do a RACI matrix, and schedule the assessment kickoff and you know, there's surveys and other activities that we'll talk about, but just really make sure that everybody buys into the schedule so that they're there. Don't overload the schedule. Most of these people are going to be very busy people. They probably don't have any one day to spend on assessment work. So
Hmm.
never load any one day to the max. Make sure that they have work time for other things during that same day. I usually use a rule of thumb, 4 hours per day maximum for assessment work. And
Hmm.
that's not the consultant. The consultant, of course, is working 12 hours a day. But you know, the folks, you have to recognize they're busy. So, but for the time they are scheduled, you know, it's expected that they be available and participate. So you get that
Gotcha.
alignment.
And I know you're talking about surveys here as being a central part. I'm assuming we're going to talk about that here. You know, how do you collect the information for the assessment?
Surveys are really valuable tools. They seem kind of boring to a lot of folks, but in reality, it's the only way you can collect both two types of information that are critical to an assessment. Part of it's just data. I mean, you
Hmm.
can use some automatic tools to gather some of the technical information if you know, let's say a network diagram, network configuration, and so on. But if you you know, there's so many things that you just need people to fill in the blanks. So team organization, tool chain, process bottlenecks, metrics, those are some examples. Uh, but you also want to gather opinions and
Hmm.
perspectives, so that you can only really get through surveys. A survey could be in the form of an interview, but I generally like to start with a written survey because that's the most efficient way to do it. You don't expect every single core team member to fill out a survey necessarily,
Hmm.
but you want to get enough data that you can then enter into the assessment with some meaningful information. I mean, these are just a couple of examples listed there. You know, provide a functional organization chart, identifying tooling that's being used today. That all of that information, you know, helps you get a better perspective of the current state and current, you know, thinking, if you like, of the organization.
Yeah, you sort of get a pulse, you know, the heartbeat of what's going on at that point, and the barrier of entry of actually tilting up a survey is so low now. There's so many tools out there to help in this process, just laying it out. And quick question: how long typically are these surveys?
I usually allow a week for the surveys to be filled in. There's
Mm-hmm.
5 different they're actually documents.
Mm-hmm.
They're fill in the blank documents, and I expect typically about 5 different people out of the organization to fill it in. Some of them are answered by only 1 or 2 people, and some of them require at least three people to answer. It usually takes about a week. And the actual survey itself, how long does it take the individual to fill it out? Well, it'll depend on how well they've kept their information handy to fill out.
Understood. Understood. But I can imagine with everyone on the same page of understanding the business goal behind it, people are going to be interested in actually providing value. And every people always seem to know where the learning needs to be addressed. So,
well, I think part of it again is they realize that this isn't just being collected and being put on a shelf.
correct.
It's going to be fed back and going to
Mhm.
be used. So they do take it seriously typically.
Correct. I love it. So we have another survey for the audience. As you look into some of the goals that you would have as you get alignment and you were to go to your leadership, what would be the highest priority use case for evaluating and managing your value stream? And I know some of these are cut off, so I'll read them to you. That hey, you want to reduce the effort and cost of orchestration tasks such as test environment setup. You want to automate the collection of data for both governance and compliance audits. You want to automate the collection of data needed for process capacity planning. Or maybe, hey, this doesn't really help you at all. So go ahead and take a second. Again, Mark, what do you think what do you think most people are going to say at this point?
Because the answer to the last one was they're still trying to learn, it's pretty much anybody's guess. But I actually think the folks that are familiar with VSM often think of it as really in the context of governance as a way to gather data across the entire pipeline. So I suspect D will be the highest answer, but I don't want to bias people's opinions because I think they're all valid answers depending on their perspective. And certainly as they learn more about VSM, then their answers may evolve too over
Yeah,
time.
it's funny. As I've gone through these things, there's a lot of really big efficiencies until people run into governance, and it's like, crap. Well, that just shut everything down. And so, as the maturity in pipelines go, well, the initial thought is I want to remove bottlenecks. The thought then really starts to migrate towards, okay, I've got to do something about this governance crap because it's killing me, or the data collection for managing the process. So we'll go ahead and close this out and see what folks had to say. Well, there you go, removing bottlenecks. Clearly what is mostly interesting and absolutely square in the sights of value stream management. So moving along, really, as we look into this, we talked about aligning the goals now with what it is. How do you align these assessments with the business goals? So, in running the process, we've talked to leadership. We've got the goals that we want to focus on. We've done some assessments. We've gotten some questions around with this. So how do we get this all aligned? What's this look like? And you put up here a tool. Take us through this.
So this is actually a sample of a tool that I use. I've used it in various formats, but essentially when you're talking about value stream management, again, I refer back to the State of the DevOps report and those 6 categories of goals. And under the hood, there's actually multiple lower level goals under each of them, but this is like the top level. So the idea is to get the cross-functional team, the leaders and everybody involved in the assessment team to agree on what are the priorities. It's amazing to me when you start the process, they all think they know what their goals are for their value stream. And as they work through it together in a workshop setting, assisted by this tool, they start to realize they really didn't have a clarity on what their goals are. And this really helps zoom in. There's no point in having too many goals.
Sure.
For the implementation, you want to pick 1 or 2. So this really helps the organization pick their 1 or 2. the idea
You
of
take
this
us
tool
through
is
the current, future, and gap. I know you're doing that already.
yeah. So I mean, just take an example. Agility tends to be the highest goal, but it isn't always. There are different ways to measure agility. The duration of time from, let's say code entry or into the planning module until it's deployed in an operation. Um, so the current state might be, let's say, 10 weeks, and they really want it to be 2 weeks within a certain period of time, let's say 6 months.
Hmm.
And that you can use that to simply calculate a gap, which is nothing other than the ratio of current over future. And you can do that for the other goals, stability, efficiency, and so on. There are a lot more goals than this in the actual tool, but it boils down to these 6 categories of goals. And
Hmm.
in this case, hypothetical, the agility did turn out to be the highest rank, and it had the highest gap percentage, whereas quality and stability were 2 and 3. So this really just helps the organization, really think about what their priorities are, and that is important when you go further down the assessment process towards building a roadmap that will most suitably help the organization. These are not independent, by the way. If you work on improving agility, you are probably going to be doing things that will help with all of the other categories as well. But
Sure.
that's the idea.
Gotcha. So in effect, you've talked to leadership, you've got the business goals that they've stated. Now you've got a tool where you can actually look from the assessment and compare what, people are saying. If leadership says, gosh, security is our biggest deal, and then the assessments come back and everybody's saying we've got to go faster and our gap is 500%. That should be our number one. You've got an issue to solve, but if they're already aligned that we've got to go faster and that's what everybody's saying, and hey, look, we see that you've got alignment that this is where we got to focus on.
Exactly. Yes. And during the conversations, this tool isn't just off on its own. It's just facilitating the communication in a workshop setting. So, it's really interesting to hear the conversation around choosing these numbers in the workshop. It looks like a simple chart, but in reality, the real value is the conversation around the table as you zoom in on picking a number for current.
So you made some other comments here too. If I'm looking for other metrics that I would include in my assessments, you made a comment about a report. Hey, tell me where I would go get some other assessments, kinds of questions for stability or efficiency and so forth, and agility. I know you only showed just a couple here, but tell me about that.
Well, you're welcome to email me, but again, what I did is I dissected the state of the DevOps report and some other, industry reports, and so I have other, goal categories under each of those, other specific goals under each of those categories. The state of the DevOps report is probably the key one. Not the 2018, but the 2017 laid it out fairly well in this regard.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So once this is aligned and we're really focusing in on, for example, in this case, agility is the most important thing. Now I suppose it's time to, somehow I have to identify the gaps between where I'm currently at in my value stream and what's my desired future state and my future state relative to best practices. So how do I identify those gaps?
So this is something that I've done pretty much throughout my career for a lot of different things, but it certainly works in the context of an assessment as well. You identify a best practice and you try to understand, again, from the team's point of view, how important is that practice? What is your view of a current state? And these are scored kind of like, CMMI 1 to 5. So you state a practice.
Mm-hmm.
The team comes up with a score for how important is it to the organization's goals, whatever they chose as goals, and the current state. So this is linked to the last slide, right? This is not independent of the last tool.
Sure.
All these importances are relative to the goals that you chose, and the current state is again relative to the goal. So
Mm-hmm.
if you were to walk through some examples here, these are best practices for value stream management. This first one, shared environment conflicts are managed using a value stream management tool, provides visibility, environment, availability, and supports workflows. So the idea would be the assessment team would debate that. How important is it? In this case, they came up and said, hey, it's critical, it's a 5. And our current state is, hey, we're really not doing it, that's a 1. So the gap is 500%. This is like the ultimate gap. So clearly that is something the organization believes is important. They're not doing it very well, so it ought to be ranked pretty high. These are leading towards a ranking for roadmap implementation items. So you can go down the list. There's quite a long list of these practices. I'm just showing 4 examples, but that long list you walk through step by step in a workshop setting and ultimately end up with a fully forest ranked list that the organization itself owns and say, yeah, these are our highest priorities. If something is, more than, in this case, 250%, it would be the metric. If you're like half of the maximum rank, then the top half would be things that you'd really focus in on for implementation. You can't focus on absolutely everything in the roadmap, but
right. You got to pick some things.
The highest priorities ones, yeah. And this helps you pick what those are.
And where did you get this list of industry best practices, and how would other folks duplicate this?
Well, okay. This is something that I've spent a lot of time studying. This is not there isn't one source for this. This is part of my consulting contribution. I am going to be publishing a book later this year, so you can look at that. But
get the book, and we'll get more. Gotcha.
Right. Or I actually have a database of best practices for VSM and a lot of other things related to DevOps. Literally, thousands of best practices for different things that I draw from, but that's a private database.
Understood. And there's enough out there too that I think folks kind of have. I mean, if you're on DevOps.com, you probably have a decent idea of some of the best practices that you're hearing, and you certainly could follow the same process. Or I'm sure you could give Mark a call and say, "Hey, come help us," and you would benefit from all that, which would be great with Trace 3.
Certainly, DevOps.com is a good source for sure, and I do use DevOps.com frequently for that. But there, as you probably know, there's no one go-to Bible for DevOps. That's the book I'm hoping to publish. But it's a evolving body of knowledge. I'm also affiliated with the DevOps Institute. There's a lot of great information there. I helped create a couple of their courses. And in general, there's a large body of knowledge out there in books and webinars and DevOps events, all of that. You really need to keep an eye on, because it is an evolving body. What's important today maybe wasn't so important 3 years ago. I mean, think about containers, and as an example. But value stream management, I think, is on the rise now as a more and more important item for DevOps.
I think too, the thing that I've always heard is, if you think about it, you probably know 20 of these practices that you could evaluate and compete against them, right off the top of your head right now. You could list those things out, every one of you on this call. And if not, like I said, reach out to us and we'll have that talk. Well, moving on into the next steps is, once you've sort of talked about some of the practice, I guess the next step is to, tell me about that. What's the role of value stream mapping in this process, in this assessment?
So the assessment process, it could be boring if it wasn't, involving people. As soon as you get the folks involved in a workshop, things come alive. So the goal setting, folks start to become involved and committed and invested, if you like, into the process. The gap process also, they start to get more and more opinionated. But the third step in the assessment process workshops is to do a value stream map, where you literally sit down and say, what is our process? How long does it take to get from planning through to deployment and operations? The surveys request answers, and invariably they're completely different than what you end up once you actually sit down in a workshop and map it out. In this case, actually it was the same government agency comes to mind. The informal answer was, yeah, it takes us 2 weeks to go from plan through to deployment. And then we started mapping it out, and no, it was 9 weeks, and everybody was sort of aghast, like, wow, we had no idea, because most of the folks are sitting in one part of the value stream and they don't see the rest of it. And when you really start asking questions and building up the value stream map, you get the reality, and invariably it's shocking, and it's typically much longer than folks thought it was, and they obviously thought it was too long in the first place, so they wouldn't have bothered to come to the workshop and try to help improve it. So this is usually a real eye opener. In this particular case, the planning itself was taking 2 weeks, and this was a COTS application. Getting downloads from the vendor, getting that all organized and working, getting everything set up and prepared was 2 weeks. And the next big bottleneck was the approval process. It was a manual CAB environment to get approval for deployment, and again, setting up meetings, getting approval. So those bottlenecks ended up being planning, download, preparation, and approval in this case.
Sure. Well, and then so at this point, then you have the eye opener of like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was that bad. Certainly, you're going to have a bunch of value stream mapping terminology, Kaizen bursts, the realizations of things that could be improved, and the ideas and so forth. But out of all that, how do you prioritize the future state from that value stream mapping exercise, and what's that look like?
Well, the first cut of the priority is where are the biggest bottlenecks, right? So the main thing, you're trying to reduce bottlenecks. So to do that, you first of all look at where the biggest bottlenecks are. In this case, there was 3 equal ones. They were in no particular order. So to really get a ranking, you had to start on the process of, well, what could we do? Where's the real waste? How much time could we save if we automated some things or did some things to improve? So it did require a further, lower level analysis of those stages that had the biggest bottlenecks. And it turned out, in this stage, we figured out we could save 9 days by automating the CAB process. Of course, the CAB people weren't too happy about hearing that, but mostly it was just eliminating meetings, to have CAB as CAB policy as code, and codifying downloads, codifying the backlog, and looking at what that would do to those stages. This would save 9 days, 8 days, 6 days. So you came up with a ranking based on the amount of savings you could get for those biggest bottlenecks. So it was the 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is it seems like this is the moment of truth for everyone. When you're in the meeting doing a value stream mapping exercise and you're like, oh my gosh, and everyone really does hear at this point, I've gotten the alignment from the leadership. I know that agility is our most important thing. We've got to remove bottlenecks. So, and there's many books written on value stream mapping. Go grab one. There are a number that are great, but I'll tell you, it's really different going from book to being in a room where you're doing a session and everybody is looking at the same thing. How on earth are you ever going to get the CAB guys to, back off from, we have to have these meetings because that's what we've always done, or whatever other governance and process. I'll tell you, when you get the whole group in the room, the tone changes. And it becomes, we're one team under this one goal of delivering faster. And these exercises are really valuable, which really, brings me to the next question. It's like, okay, so as you're starting to identify the bottlenecks, people start to change what they want. So how do you create the solution then for the future state? And what are you doing now?
Yeah, in this particular case, we sort of did a lot of the next step and the prior step because we had to figure out the ranking. But the idea is that you can then apply those changes and remap out the value stream according to the changes, and you can see that their goal was to get down to 2 weeks, and this showed how to do that. And I think I should go to the next slide at the same time. Just getting a feasible value stream isn't sufficient. You then want to go back around to each of the individuals and say, hey, are you okay with this? Because ultimately, again, the team needs to own it. And quite often you'll find out that even even at that stage, when you talk one-on-one or in interviews or even sometimes in the team setting, with a vote rank, they might say, you know what, yeah, this would save a little more time, but there's reasons why we would like to do things in a slightly different order. There may be some technical reasons or other reasons, organizational reasons or that, even though it may be technically feasible. In this case, the order got altered when we went through to that next step of getting alignment through interviews.
Absolutely. We're going to skip our next assessment question and just move on. There's let's just keep going. We're running out of time here with just lots of interesting stuff. So, all right, expert analysis. How do you figure out the detailed solution to the problems?
So this is where you really just, experience is hard to substitute. So, you've got to involve value stream management vendors like Platora clearly is a leader in this field, and consultants. If you're doing a value stream management assessment, presumably you're doing it, with the support of expertise. And it's not just a matter of coming up with the best technical solution. You've got to take into account what call the three dimensions of, of DevOps, or pretty much anything: the people, the process, and the technology. Balance all of that in order to come up with a solution. So it really does require some expertise.
Gotcha. And so then taking that, and now how do you now you got to take that expertise, but now you got to actually, you need a roadmap for, how do you get that into a roadmap for implementation?
So yeah, this is like a serial road. Usually starts with, okay, once we finish the assessment, assuming everybody agrees we want to actually build it, that doesn't mean you go to the end of the road. You start with simple steps. You're typically going to build the project using Agile and DevOps approaches, step by step, and you bring along the people, the process, and the technology at the same time. So you could show the road as actually three parallel roads, if you like, the people, process, and the technology. But start with a trial, ultimately do that before you get into production, make sure things work. Too many times I've seen folks, jump to production, get something kind of working, people will reject it because it wasn't thought through, and it's not a great way to do it. So I always recommend, start small, build, test as you go, and ultimately you're going to have a better solution.
Yeah, I know. Depending upon your level of buy-in from the executive side, I've seen the other side from organizations like Capital One, even, where they've gone to the extreme of taking one whole team and said, okay, we're going to focus on this section of the value stream. Go. And people think they're just reworking the way things work for one section until they, they're like, okay, that was cool. I learned a bunch of stuff. Now I'm going to get back to work. And leadership was like, no, this is our new way of doing things. And there's still a J curve in that learning where things get better, then they get worse. And so this is a process, and, expect it to be a bit of a bumpy road. Different ways of making that happen.
No, you raise a good point. It's not good enough to just get something into production, but operationalizing it, making sure that it continues to be used. I kind of use a rule of thumb, keep involved for at least 3 releases of it, so that you see that people are really getting the support they need, and that it's getting the value that you will get out of it. You won't really be sure you get the value until people are demonstratively using it.
Well, and kind of next step is okay, so you kind of got to prove it, right? So once you have this solution, you not only have to prove it, but how do you prove it, and how do you expand it across the enterprise?
Yeah, so the idea of the model application, I think, is really valuable. It helps with a number of things. Not only do you get a working application, but you get a lot of value of other folks learning from observing what's going on with that model, and those learnings can typically be gleaned through having very broad retrospectives and deep retrospectives. That learning practices and values are distributed across the organization through different means. There's a Japanese word I often refer to called yokoten, where you're proactively sharing best practices. So proactively share best practices so other application teams can use them. And over time, it's pretty interesting how everybody really wants to, keep up with the model, and their application will, implement what is relevant from the model, or maybe substitute other things that are not relevant for their particular application. But before you know it, you've got VSM across the enterprise.
Absolutely. Well, cool. So, that kind of takes us to the last real question, which is, so what's the expected outcome of value stream, of this whole value stream management assessment?
I think I've said it all the way through the presentation, but to me, the whole real critical point of all of this of an assessment is to get people aligned. If everybody knows what their goals are and they agree, boy, things go a lot faster. And the assessment is really a tool to help with that. It does it in a number of ways. It does it partly by setting goals, but it also provides the roadmap. But probably most importantly, it provides the metrics. And everybody wants to get good grades, if you like, and be part of the success. So that's you'll know that you've got a good outcome when everybody's helping get to the goals and contributing collaboratively.
Which is kind of the whole point. So, and I think, well, I guess we better move on and get some time for some questions, but just that's why we're here. Platora is a vendor in the space of value stream management. In fact, we're one of the leaders. We are the most complete value stream management platform. We've got a lot of awards. We've been doing this for a while. We just didn't know that it was called value stream management when we first started. And yet now here we are. If you're going to remove bottlenecks and go faster, you have to get alignment. A tool is not going to do that automatically for you. But if you utilize Platora to interconnect your tool chain, you'll do some really interesting things. You'll unify your tool chain so that everyone can see what is going on. That visibility brings efficiency. If you use the management capabilities inside of Platora to manage environments, releases, deployments, and manage the continual improvement through those learnings that you have, and then feed that data into a predictive analytics engine that we provide, you can then gain insights across the entirety. That visibility and insights automatically creates collaboration and efficiencies. Those things are what you need so that as you align with your leadership and run through this process, you can now support this to prove, hey, you know what? We took a model application. Let me show you that we did better than we did before, and we need to replicate this process across every team, every product, every pipeline, and continue to automate, continue to create efficiencies, and continue to remove bottlenecks at every step so we can improve the value of what we do. I don't think there's any team truly that doesn't want to improve their efficiency and do better. Everyone's trying to do the right thing, and aligning those goals are what is critical. So with that, I think we're ready for some questions and to turn it over to Charlene.
Okay, great. We have gotten some questions in so far, so let's just dive right on in. I think we can probably get to 2 or 3 of them before we have to close things out. The first question is, Jason says, there's a lot of good information. It seems like a lot of this aligns to the Scaled Agile Framework DevOps materials. I'm wondering if there was any thoughts around taking already established best practices around DevOps from other organizations like Scaled Agile Inc. Just curious.
Do you want to take that, Jeff, or me?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I definitely am aware of that, and certainly they're, part of the, we didn't list out all of the practices that are used during the assessment, but certainly some of them are from the Scaled Agile Framework. In fact, that's a good question, but yes, and you're right. There is alignment. Whereas the Scaled Agile Framework is especially rich in best practices for especially the front end of the value stream and some of the back end, but there are other sources that tend to have a little more richness in things like the deployment end, the infrastructure side of things, and that type of thing.
All right. Okay, great. Let's see. Next question. Here's a good one. What is the title of your book, Mark?
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, it's called Doing DevOps: From Chaos to Continuous Improvement.
All right, great. Next question. I think we can get one or two more. What does a successful and a failed assessment look like?
Oh, yeah. So a successful assessment is one that ends up, going from having a roadmap to jumping into having that same organization building the recommendations of the roadmap into their, agile and other planning frameworks. So in other words, it's being implemented. A failed one is kind of the opposite, right? I mean, where everybody agrees with the results, but now that we know what we need to do, we don't have time for this, or we don't have the budget. So that would be a failed one, in my opinion. Even though the assessment passed, but but it wasn't used. So, and I've seen both. Examples of both of those.
Okay, all right, great. Last question, then I think we're going to have to wrap things up. Are there some types of pipeline officially problems that VSM is not particularly helpful in solving, or what structural obstacles tend to block successful VSM solutions?
Jeff, do you want to take that, or me?
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so I think that the one of the challenges with VSM is the integration with the tool chains, and some people get a little overwhelmed by the fact that if you really have many different tools in the tool chains, then having plugins that will plug into a value stream management tool, that's really where you're going to get the most benefit. So that, if you like, is a bottleneck, but it also is where the value is, right, for the value stream management by having that integration. So ultimately, I think it's a question of just how committed are you to really achieving your goals. If you really are committed, then that's not a major bottleneck. It's really just part of building the solution.
I couldn't agree with that more. I know one of the first things people say is, well, I have no idea how long this takes, and how do I connect my tool chain? And that's where I always want to raise my hands, like, this is really, while it seems like the scariest and the hardest problem of connecting the tool chain, it's actually like the most fundamental and frankly kind of the easiest. If you don't know how to connect your tool chain, call Plutora. We can help you with that. But that really is not the major value. The major value comes in the management and the analytics that come along with this.
All right, great. Well, we are about 3 minutes to the top of the hour, so we are going to have to close out the question and answer period. If we didn't get to your question, I'm very sorry, but just know that the folks at Plutora and Mark will be getting a copy of the questions that came through. So I'm sure somebody from the organization will be more than happy to follow up with you and get your question answered. Okay, before we close things out, I would like to do the drawing for the 5 $50 Amazon gift cards that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and select our first winner. And that person is Arindam Mukherjee. Congratulations, Arindam. Our next $50 Amazon gift card winner is, let's see, Gabriel Sofian. Apologies if I mispronounce your name, but congratulations, Gabriel. Our third winner is Connie Smith. Congratulations, Connie. Next winner is Walter Gomez. Congratulations, Walter. And the final winner is Sean Touching. Congratulations to all of our winners. We'll be contacting you offline to arrange for the gift card, so stay tuned for that. Also want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded, so if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to listen to it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. We will be sending out an email after today's event that includes a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website. You can always go there and check it out. Just go to devops.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section there, and it should be right there waiting for you. Jeff and Mark, thank you both so much for such a great presentation. Judging from the type of questions we got, it was a great presentation. I know they got a lot out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Awesome. All right. And I want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.